For centuries, the town square was the epicenter of the small town citizens' social and informational life. There were postings about local events and news. There were conversations with neighbors, entertainment, so on and so forth. And we still have something like a town square. Not a literal one with a fountain and a guy feeding pigeons. No, the modern town square is a glowing rectangle in your hand at 2 o'clock in the morning while you're supposed to be asleep, but instead you're scrolling. And while you're scrolling, you sometimes see things that make you stop. Breaking. Trump is bringing back the draft. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Pam Bondi caught in a shady deal with a mysterious investment firm. Scroll, scroll. New poll shows President Trump second only to Abraham Lincoln. Scroll, scroll. 87% of ICE detainees have violent criminal records. And every single one of these posts has the same thing underneath it. Thousands of comments, hundreds of thousands of shares, and that little caption that says, "Why isn't the media talking about this?" But here's the funny part. Sometimes the media is talking about it. Sometimes the story is half true. Sometimes the story is wildly exaggerated. And sometimes the story started with a guy on the internet named Patriot Eagle 1776 who made a meme in his basement and has zero basis in reality. Welcome to modern American politics, where the fastest way to influence public opinion is no longer a speech or a debate or even a press conference. It's a meme. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another supplemental installment of Back Porch Files from Your Neighbor on the Left, the podcast about progressive politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, and I am your host. And today we're going to be talking about memes. Not the ones with angry cats, but the political ones. We live in the most information-rich era in human history. At any moment, you can pull out your phone and access more knowledge than existed in entire libraries 100 years ago. And what do we do with this miraculous technology more often than not? We use it to share pictures of politicians with big red arrows pointing at things and captions written in all caps. Now, don't get me wrong. Memes can be hilarious. They can be clever. Sometimes they even make a genuinely good political point and have some valid information. But memes have also quietly become one of the most powerful forces shaping public opinion in the United States, because memes are simple, they're quick, and they are perfectly engineered for the way our brains and our social media feeds work. A meme doesn't ask you to read a policy paper. It doesn't ask you to examine complicated facts or nuance. It just says, "Look at this!" And then it hits you with the punchline. Most viral political rumors follow a pretty predictable path. First, a claim appears somewhere online, usually places like a social media platform such as X or TikTok or Threads or Truth Social. Maybe it's a screenshot. Maybe it's a short video clip with no context. Maybe it's just a sentence written in bold letters over some dramatic background. Then something interesting happens. The post gets shared by someone with a big following. Then another person shares it. Then someone turns it into a meme. Then someone else makes a TikTok explaining the meme. And suddenly, millions of people have seen the claim before anyone has had time to check whether it's actually true. But there's another layer to this that many people don't realize. Not every account spreading these posts is necessarily a real person. Social media researchers have found large numbers of automated bot accounts operating on platforms like X and Threads. These accounts are programmed to repost content, amplify hashtags, and flood comment sections to make a particular claim appear more popular or more widely believed than it actually is. So sometimes what looks like a huge groundswell of opinion online might actually be a handful of viral posts being pushed by a network of automated accounts. In other words, sometimes the crowd you see online isn't entirely human. And once that momentum starts, the algorithm does the rest. By the time actual reporters start digging into a claim, the story has already traveled halfway across the internet. And here's the cruel twist. The correction, if one is required, the careful, boring, fact-checked explanation almost never spreads as far as the original claim. Because the original claim was exciting. The correction is usually something like, well, technically, that's not exactly what happened. And nobody ever made a meme that says, well, technically. There are a few reasons memes are so powerful. The first is simplicity. Real life is complicated. Policy is complicated. Government is complicated. Memes take complicated issues and compress them into something your brain can process in about 2 seconds. Which is perfect because 2 seconds is about how long most of us spend looking at anything before we scroll again. The second reason memes work is emotion. Social media algorithms, the invisible systems that decide what shows up in your feed, love content that makes people react. And nothing gets reaction like outrage. If something makes you laugh or gasp or shake your head and say, "Can you believe this?" you're much more likely to share it. And the moment you share it, the algorithm says, people are engaging with this. Let's show it to more people. Congratulations. You have just helped launch the meme into orbit. Now, things get really interesting when politicians start playing the meme game too. Because modern politics doesn't just react to viral content. Sometimes it runs on it. Politicians understand that a viral post can shape the conversation far faster than a press conference ever could. So sometimes they amplify it. Sometimes they repost it. Sometimes they hint at something just vague enough that their supporters fill in the blanks. And before you know it, the internet is arguing about something that may or may not even exist. A well-known example of this is Donald Trump, who has repeatedly shared memes and viral posts directly from his social media accounts. Over the years, he has reposted content ranging from exaggerated political claims to crude internet memes. Most recently, of course, Trump took some widespread criticism after sharing a horribly racist meme that depicted Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as apes. The post got wide circulation online before eventually being removed, but not before millions and millions of people had seen it. Moments like that illustrate how memes can move from the fringes of the internet straight into mainstream political discourse. Once something is shared by a major political figure, it can instantly become part of the national conversation. It becomes a kind of political echo chamber where speculation starts and then turns into headlines, and headlines then turn into memes, and memes turn into political talking points. And you know that once a narrative takes hold, it can be incredibly hard to unwind. Because people don't like giving up stories, especially stories they've already shared with their friends. There's a pretty common phrase that appears under a lot of viral political memes, and you've probably seen it. It says, why isn't the media talking about this? And sometimes the answer is actually pretty simple, because the claim is bogus, or at least it hasn't been verified yet, or because the story is still developing, or because the original post left out some extremely important context. By the time those details emerge, the meme has already done its job. Millions of people have seen it. Thousands of arguments have happened in comment sections, and somewhere on the internet, there's already a new meme explaining why the fact checkers are part of the conspiracy. Now, all of this might sound a little silly, and honestly, a lot of the time it is, but there's a deeper problem underneath it. Democracy depends on people being able to argue about policies, ideas, and priorities. But for that argument to work, we have to agree on some basic facts about reality. If one group believes one set of viral memes and the other group believes a completely different set, the conversation breaks down before it really has a chance to get going. Suddenly, we're not debating solutions anymore. We're debating which version of reality is real. And that's a much harder argument to solve. Now, a recent example of this that I talked about on this podcast was the viral contention, or the viral rumor, the viral belief, whatever you want to say, that part of the Iran deal that President Obama had set up back in 2015 was contingent upon him shipping pallets full of taxpayer money to Iran in exchange for their cooperation. And as I pointed out in that episode, the part about the pallets of cash was actually correct. But the part about it being taxpayer money wasn't. The money that was sent to Iran was actually Iran's money. That was, in part, assets of theirs that had been locked down because of sanctions, and in other part, a settlement from a disputed weapons sale that went all the way back to the late 70s. But the memes that you see around on this subject say nothing about those two facets. They just show pallets of cash and talk about how Obama paid for Iran's complicity. And it's not an isolated thing. There are memes that push false narratives from both sides. So, how do you navigate a world where political information moves at meme speed? The first step is simple. Slow down. If a post makes you immediately angry or immediately shocked or elicits any immediate reaction, it's usually a sign that you should pause for a second before you share it. Look for original sources. See whether actual reporting exists beyond the meme. Ask yourself a basic question. Who benefits if I believe this immediately? Because sometimes the goal of viral misinformation isn't even to convince you of something specific. Sometimes the goal is simply just to keep everyone angry, confused, and constantly reacting. I try to do this with information that I repost or that I turn into memes. And oftentimes when I find a nugget of information and I do even just 5 minutes worth of digging, I find out that it's either misstated, totally incorrect, or missing key elements of context. Now, memes aren't going away. They're part of the culture now, and they're funny and they're creative, and sometimes they capture a political moment better than a 1,000-word article ever could. But when memes start replacing facts instead of illustrating them, politics starts to look less like a debate and more like a giant game of telephone. A rumor appears, someone exaggerates it, someone turns it into a meme, and before long, millions of people are arguing about something that may have started with a screenshot and a clever caption and not much more substance than that. Which means that in the modern political landscape, one of the most powerful forces shaping public opinion isn't a campaign speech. It's a meme someone made while sitting on their couch late at night. And that's something worth remembering the next time you're scrolling through the modern town square, because sometimes the most important political skill in America today isn't arguing. It's knowing when to say, maybe I should check that before I share it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to download and listen to this installment of Back Porch Files from Your Neighbor on the Left. Grateful to have you listening. Would love to hear from you in any way, shape, or form, whether it's critique or compliment, whether it's question or comment, whatever. If you go to the podcast website, www.neighborontheleft.com, among other things, you'll find a contacts page with all of the social media links for the podcast and the email address, any of which you can use to get in touch with me. Also on the website is a page that has a web player where you can listen to or download any episode of the podcast going all the way back to the beginning. And also, I've started doing blog posts that mirror the things I talk about in the podcast, including the sources that I use to get the information that I share. I'll be back on Tuesday with another full episode of Your Neighbor on the Left. So until then, stay engaged, stay kind, and have the kind of week you'd wish for others.